Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global South. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Israeli strikes hit Hezbollah's stronghold in Beirut. This after the Iran-backed group launched around 140 rockets at Israel in a major retaliation to the series of device explosions that rocked Lebanon this week. US President Joe Biden to host leaders of India, Australia and Japan at his Delaware home for a diplomatic push to counter China as he bids farewell to the Quad. The Africa Centre for Disease Control and Prevention says the mpox outbreak across the continent is not under control, adding that cases are still rising in several countries. The UK's state debt hits a landmark high, equaling the country's annual output, as the Starmer government warns of tough decisions on tax and spending ahead of its maiden budget. And British luxury departmental store chain Harrods apologises over allegations against its former owner. 37 women accuse late Egyptian billionaire Mohammed Al Fayed of sexual assault. Hello and welcome. Let's take a look at our top story. Once solid bilateral partners, South Africa and the United States today share a complicated relationship. Geopolitical developments, including the war in the heart of Europe and the one in West Asia, have further added complexities to the ties between the two countries. South Africa's Foreign Minister, Ronald Lamola, recently concluded a visit to the United States that was aimed at strengthening bilateral relations and cooperation. However, Ramaphosa's minister also asked the United States to not preach. He said that Washington should not tell his country what to do. He added that South Africa seeks continued frank engagements with the US on geopolitical matters based on mutual respect. But why did Ramaphosa's minister send this message to Washington? Now, this was possibly because Israeli diplomats were reportedly lobbying US lawmakers to pressure South Africa to drop its genocide case against Israel at the ICJ. Pretoria dragged Israel to the International Court for its indiscriminate bombardment of Gaza, which has resulted in over 41,000 deaths so far. In Washington, Ronald Lamola met the key stakeholders, including the House of Representatives Subcommittee on Africa, the Congressional Black Caucus, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and bipartisan think tanks. Addressing one of the conferences in Washington, he said South Africa won't tell the U.S. what to do, and it expects the U.S. not to tell Pretoria what to do. Not just South Africa. Earlier this week, even Tanzania rebuked the US for alleged interference. The Tanzanian president, Samia Suluhu Hassan, had slammed the US and its Western allies for criticizing the country's handling of internal affairs. Mutual disappointment and mistrust have troubled relations between South Africa and the US in recent years. America has questioned South Africa's supposed inconsistent sense of moral outrage. This is because while it has taken Israel to the ICJ over its Gaza offensive, Pretoria has claimed to maintain a neutral stance on Russia's war in Ukraine. It has refused to join the West's alliance against Russia and has abstained on every Ukraine-related resolution adopted by the UN General Assembly. The ties nosedived further in May of 2023 when US Ambassador accused South Africa of supplying weapons to Russia amid a raging war in Ukraine. South Africa has also been pushing for a shift to a multipolar world with a stronger global south, where developing countries would have more influence. Hence, it views China and Russia, its BRIC partners, as friends rather than enemies. South Africa has also been hosting navies of Russia and China to perform drills in its waters. South Africa's ruling party, the African National Congress, has historical ties to Moscow. During Cold War, the Soviet Union supported its anti-apartheid struggle, while Washington designated the ANC as a terrorist organization. And as far as ties with China go, they are crucial for South Africa's economy. Now, South Africa trades more with China than with any other country in the world. In recent years, the junta-led states in Africa were the first to reject the US and the West, and instead turn to Russia. Now, South Africa and Tanzania, two strong democracies in the continent, have asked Washington to not preach. Is the United States losing the race of influence in Africa to Russia and China? For more on this, we have with us Ayanda Sishu-Wigzell, a political commentator and journalist joining us live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Great to speak to you, Ayanda.
Thank you, and good afternoon to all of the Firstpost listeners and viewers.
Ayanda, what are the historical and geopolitical contexts behind Minister Lamola's statement regarding the US?
You were right to point out in your introduction that South Africa and Palestine do have a lot in common, and also there are geopolitical ties that South Africa has to the United States. But more so, the relationship that we have with Palestine is that of historical ties that we share with one another. Of course, we know that our first state president, our founding president of South Africa, Nelson Mandela, he made the statement of saying, if Palestine is not free, then we are not free, and therefore the state and of South Africa is tied to what the state of Palestine looks like. And right now, Palestine has no statehood. They are currently being bombed and attacked, and what we are seeing is a state of laws that look and are envisioned much like apartheid. So they are lacking statehood. Their lands are being occupied by another state that is not of their own, and they are being subjugated, much like the history of South Africa. And so we have had very strong ties to what is happening in Palestine, particularly because of the history that we have under apartheid. And so that is why South Africans are really resonating hard with what is happening in Gaza right now. And that's the reason why geopolitically we have always maintained strong relations with the people of Palestine, in particular the resistance fighters and the resistance political parties that are within that are operating within Gaza as well, particularly with Yasser Arafat, former leader of Gaza, has had strong relations with Nelson Mandela, former president of South Africa. So we have had very strong ties with the people of Gaza, especially with the people of Palestine, which is why it is that we are right now in the world when it comes to fighting against the genocide that is currently happening there right now.
And how might this statement impact South Africa's diplomatic relations with the United States and other Western countries? Could there be potential diplomatic repercussions and shifts in international relations away from traditional Western allies towards Russia and China?
We are seeing that happen already. There are African countries that have wholly rejected the West. We are seeing a lot more people moving away from trading in the US dollar to trading in the UN and trading in the yuan. And trading also in their local currencies. We are seeing countries such as Uganda being moved off of AGOA because of their legal and their political stances when it comes to certain human rights atrocities. And so we also, when AGOA the African Growth Opportunity Act was in jeopardy for us. Because, again, of our stance when it comes to Palestine and also our non-aligned stance in Russia. We had to send last year a high delegation to go to the United States in order to speak, and that was the former Minister of Trade and Industry, Minister Ibrahim Patel, went to the United States along with a high delegation in order to convince them for us to stay within the AGOA trade agreement. And so we are starting to slowly see the repercussions. You also mentioned in your introductions with Ruben Bridgetti, who is the ambassador here to the, from the United States, and the demarches that he received because of the allegations of us selling weapons. So we are already starting to see the pushback diplomatically from what is happening. We are also now seeing the pushback from Western countries, but also we are seeing a lot of global South countries starting to stand up for themselves and saying that we are no longer going to be dictated to by the West and by powerful nations, particularly in the United Nations. We are seeing more of a call for reform in the Security Council to make sure that African countries actually have a permanent seat on the Security Council, because we know that the Security Council is the most powerful decision-making body in the United Nations. And right now, as it stands, the United Nations General Assembly can't really do anything and move without the Security Council. So global South countries are already starting to do something about the position that they're in and making sure that they're not dictated to and spoken down to by Western nations. And I think that it's about damn time.
And what are the possible domestic political motivations behind Minister Lamola's remarks?
And domestically, as I said before, South Africans really resonate with what is happening and the struggles that the people of Palestine are going through currently right now, because historically, those have been our struggles as people of South Africa. And so a lot of people, especially in the month of May, when we were voting in the elections, they really were thinking about their votes and adding the issues of Gaza into the reasons why it is that they are or they are not going to vote for certain political parties. And so we saw that foreign policies of certain political parties were front and center. For the first time in a really long time, people were questioning, what is your stance when it comes to Palestine and the people of Gaza? And we see that there have been different political organizations, such as, the African National Congress, which has strong ties to political organizations in Palestine, but also more so we have economic freedom fighters who also came out in support of Gaza. But also you have political parties such as the Democratic Alliance who have not fully come out in support of Gaza, and that has really actually damaged their stance on their voting numbers, because people really do then question what is your stance when it comes to human rights as well. But we also need to question South Africa's non-aligned stance, right, when it comes to Russia, because people do tend to say that there is a double standard, and that yes, it is, we are morally obligated to make sure that we stand up for the people of Palestine when it comes to the international laws that have been, that are in peril right now as it stands. But we also need to understand that Russia went and invaded another nation. And that too, in and of itself, is is in direct convention of the international laws, and that needs to be called out itself. So how is it that we can call out Israel, but at the same time we keep quiet when it comes to our friends? And so there is a double standard and a level of hypocrisy that is involved in this. But make no mistake, the whataboutism does not feature in this when it comes to the 40,000 people that are dying in Gaza and the actual televised genocide that we are seeing. And it is a genocide according to the International Court of Justice. So it's not just me who's saying this, but this is according to international law and according to the Geneva Convention of 1961 that says that you're not allowed to bomb civilian homes, you're not allowed to bomb hospitals, and you're not allowed to bomb schools. And this is what is currently happening in Gaza right now as we speak.
And as always, great to have you on Firstpost Africa. Thank you for your valued insights and analysis on all the latest.
Thank you.
Moving to the Horn of Africa, Turkey has launched a new bid to ease the ongoing tensions between neighbors Somalia and Ethiopia. Mediator Turkey, which has hosted 2 rounds of indirect talks between the 2 rivals, will now meet them separately ahead of a 3rd round of talks. The Horn of African neighbours, Ethiopia and Somalia, are at odds over a maritime deal that Ethiopia signed with Somaliland. Somaliland is Somalia's breakaway region that seeks independence. Under the deal signed in January, Ethiopia would access Somaliland's port and would lease a part of the coastline to build a naval base. In exchange, it would become the first nation to officially recognise Somaliland. However, Somalia called the deal an assault on its sovereignty and retaliated by expelling the Ethiopian ambassador, and also threatened to kick out thousands of Ethiopian troops stationed in the country helping battle Islamist insurgents. Somalia's close ally, Turkey, has mediated to resolve the issue. Ankara has been carrying out shuttle diplomacy between Ethiopian and Somalian foreign ministers. It hosted 2 rounds of talks in July and August. A 3rd round of talks was scheduled to take place on Tuesday, but was cancelled. Turkey said that as the 2 sides are not meeting directly anyway, it is now aiming to establish one-on-one contact to converge their positions and then later bring them together. Turkish Foreign Minister added that there were lessons learned from the first 2 rounds of talks. Ankara says it is continuing to engage with Mogadishu and Addis Ababa at the ministerial and head of state level. However, the verbal attacks have continued despite the ongoing mediation efforts. Earlier this month, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed warned rivals against invasion. He said that anyone planning on invading his country should think 10 times, as any attack would be repelled. Now, these remarks were seemingly directed towards Somalia and Ethiopia's other rival, Egypt. Addis Ababa and Cairo are in dispute over a dam on the Nile River. Amidst this dispute, Cairo has lent its support to Mogadishu in its conflict with Ethiopia. Now, Egypt has even provided Somalia with weapons and is offering to replace Ethiopian troops in Somalia. Not just this, but Turkey and Egypt, who were also rivals for years, have now taken a big step to ease ties. Earlier this month, the Egyptian President Abdel al-Fattah al-Sisi had travelled to Ankara in a historic visit and met with his counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and both leaders discussed the tensions in the Horn of Africa. They agreed on the necessity to maintain the unity of Somalia. Amidst these developments, how will the issue in the Horn of Africa be solved? Will Turkey be successful in bringing the rival sides onto the same page? From the Horn of Africa, let's shift focus now to the Central Africa's Gabon. Gabon's ex-president, Ali Bongo, who was ousted in a military coup last year, has announced that he is quitting politics. In a letter addressed to the people of Gabon, Bongo said that he is withdrawing from political life and he has asked for clemency for his imprisoned wife and son, who he said are facing violence and torture. Bongo's son and wife are in detention awaiting trial on corruption allegations. 65-year-old Bongo was overthrown by the military last year in August, shortly after he won a disputed election. He ruled the oil-rich nation for 14 years. He succeeded his father, who ruled Gabon for 40 years. The family is known to have strong links to France, which is a former colonial power in Gabon. Now, Bongo was ousted in the coup led by General Brice Oligui Nguema, who is in fact also reportedly Ali Bongo's cousin. A week after his ousting, Bongo was released from house arrest, and the military even allowed him to leave the country. However, Bongo in his letter said that his movements are still restricted and he is subjected to heavy surveillance. Meanwhile, his French-born wife and son are being held in a prison in the capital of Libreville over allegations of embezzling public funds. And these charges are dismissed by their lawyers. Calling for their release, Ali Bongo said that they had been imprisoned for too long over acts for which they had not been found guilty. He said his decision to quit active politics is also applied to them. Though the military has not replied to Bongo's letter, it previously denied that Bongo's son and wife are being tortured. It is also not clear if Bongo has been forced to quit politics by the military or if he is doing so in hopes of securing his family's release. Bongo, in his letter, also admitted failings in the way that he ran the country. The Bongo dynasty has been accused of enriching itself at the expense of the nation, even though the Central African nation is resource-rich. Around 1/3 of its population lives below the poverty line. The military chief has promised that there will be free and fair elections next year, and they will lead to the formation of a new civilian government. However, he has not publicly commented if he will run for the president in the upcoming polls. And finally, to our special segment, Resurgent Africa. Amid the coups and the crises, there are many positive stories from Africa that often get overlooked, but not on this show. Our story today is from South Africa's historic Robben Island, a World Heritage Site known for its most famous prisoner, Nelson Mandela. But they say fame comes with a price. The popular island draws hundreds of thousands of tourists each year, but with that also comes a massive pile of waste. Hundreds of volunteers are carrying out a cleanliness drive on the island's coastline, and they have a message for the world ahead of the International Coastal Cleanup Day. Take a look.
This is Robben Island, one of South Africa's most favourite landmarks. The World Heritage Site is known for its most famous prisoner, Nelson Mandela. It draws over 300,000 visitors annually. But these tourist visits also bring in a massive waste burden, which adds on to waste from passing ships. Ahead of the International Coastal Cleanup Day, volunteers are carrying out cleanliness drives on the historic Robben Island coastline. With bags to gather plastic and other waste washed up on the beach and between rocks and shrubs, groups of volunteers have been conducting cleanup walks.
Most of the has been washed up by the oceans onto our coastal lines, and since we got here, the most thing that I've been picking up is actually lollipop sticks and earbuds and straws also, and that just tells me that the small things that we do as humans can actually have a negative impact on the ocean because we find it washing up on our coastal lines.
I enjoy the environment, and I think it plays a big part, and we as people we have a very bad impact on the environment, so I'm here to help pick it up. And I'd rather be here than out partying and things, because this is what I enjoy doing. So it brings me comfort to know that I am lending a hand in helping.
The International Coastal Cleanup Day is observed across the world in the third week of September every year. Under the aegis of the United Nations, participants across the world make efforts to make our planet a cleaner place to live. Volunteer organizations and individuals engage people to remove waste from the world's beaches and waterways. At the Robben Island, the event comes amid continued warnings from researchers that litter is growing faster than the human population. In Cape Town, the amount of litter washing up on the city's beaches has been increasing exponentially. This has had a harsh impact on both marine life and life on the island. The Robben Island is home to penguins and has a buffer of 1 nautical mile, which is a protected marine area. But now, the region is at threat due to increasing waste and litter.
It's also, the site is home to different species of seabirds and antelopes. And it's critical that those species that I've mentioned, are protected. We have that responsibility of protecting their breeding area. And conservation is central to our mandate.
Waste in water bodies impacts our planet at multiple levels. It not just affects humans, but deeply harms wildlife. Plastic pollution is a massive problem for our oceans. 60% of all garbage that winds up in the oceans is composed of plastic. A study says there are 46,000 individual pieces of plastic for every square mile of ocean. And researchers say plastics last a very long time in the ocean. They also say since the majority of ocean waste is derived from land-based sources, it's crucial to stop the waste at source, which is seen as the most effective way to deal with marine pollution. They say small things go a long way. So even small actions like these cleanup drives can make a big difference. Every bottle, every straw, every plastic bag and every piece of waste that we pick up leads to a cleaner and healthier ocean and a better tomorrow.
And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again at the same time on Monday. Thank you for watching